What's going on, everybody? Yo, first, you beat Sonkit. Sonkit, what's up, man? You're slow. You're like the fourth one in here today. You gotta step your game up, Sonkit. What's going on, Shivam? Dimitri, what's going on? Ankit, hello. Not Patrick, glad to see you made it. I'm not a fan of your avatar change, Patrick. Just to let you know on Twitter. I don't like when anybody changes their avatar because I get so used to seeing the picture and knowing who it is, and then when people are constantly changing it, like I don't know who's tweeting. Anyway, I'm just messing with you. Mark, good to see you. Yeah, it's been a while, man. You used to be a mainstay here, but I stopped streaming for a while. Yep, thanks, Mark. Norbert, what's going on? Good to see you. Hopefully, I've helped you out with your problems there in the Twitter DMs. All right, so what are we gonna talk about today? We're going to talk about the different types of iOS contracts, anything from like contract to hire, full-time contracting, what it's like to work at like a development agency as a contractor, and then kind of just like, you know, building a buddies app or something like that as a contractor. But first I want to get into some kind of channel housekeeping, if you will, while everybody kind of joins the stream. This is the first time I've been on since the Job Hunt Mega Vlog. Like I said in the last video, if you've seen that, I was kind of unsure if I even wanted to post that, just because I didn't make any final interviews. So I thought that was going to be the most interesting part. Reluctantly, I was like, I'll just post it anyway. Who cares? See what happens. But I got amazing feedback on that series. A lot of people loved it. So thank you guys so much for the feedback. I'm very glad I did it because, like I said, I was a little nervous about doing it. I want to talk about Instagram real quick. If you're not following me on Instagram, go ahead and give me a follow. You see the handle down there. What you're going to get there is I'm mainly going to be doing a lot of stories, not so much posting, because I'm struggling to figure out like what to actually post that's interesting on Instagram, like on an actual post. But stories, I think I can make interesting by just doing behind the scenes of like the YouTube channel and just my day-to-day in the contracting lifestyle. So if you want to see that behind the scenes stuff, give me a follow on Instagram. You'll get a lot of stories. Probably won't get many posts. That being said about the post, let me know what do you think I can post that would be interesting, because I know a lot of people just post pictures of like their computer with code on it. That's cool for a little bit, but that kind of gets old after a little while. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about that. I want to talk about Patreon real quick. Again, check that out. The Patreon community is actually taking off. I'm super thrilled with how that's going. I took a break for like a month from YouTube, and the Patreon community kind of died down, but we kind of got a shot of new blood in there that's really going great. Just some of the stuff we're talking about, like we got a guy in there that's going to a live boot camp at the moment, so he's telling us all about what he's learning in that boot camp. We got people going through the interview process telling us about that with companies like Nike, and just general Swift conversation. So if you're here in the chat and you're part of the Patreon community, I just want to say thank you, because it's been better than I expected. So if you're interested in joining that community, check out patreon.com/Sean Allen down there in the lower right. All right, so if you're new to the stream, how I do it is I usually talk about a topic. This time it's going to be the different types of contracts. I'll talk about that for 5 to 10 minutes and then get into Q&A. So go ahead, and while I'm talking about that, go ahead and start asking your questions, because I'll scroll back up through. I usually hit every single question unless it's ridiculous. So go ahead and ask your questions. I'll scroll up and find it after my little spiel here. Let me catch up on the chat to make sure nothing crazy is going on before I go. Bro, how many NBA teams workout gear do you got? Well, I tried out for like 20 teams, so I got all these t-shirts for free. Just kidding. No, I didn't. I'm just a huge NBA fan, so I have pretty much half the league, I would say, and getting more. But they're just good to play basketball, and they're like the super light, dry fit t-shirts. So anytime I wear like a normal cotton t-shirt when I play basketball, it just feels so heavy. So that's why I wear these. All right. Sonkit's excuse. He said he was working a bit, so that's why he was a little late. For those that are just jumping in, Sonkit's always the first, and he's always posting first, but he got beat today. So anyway, all right, let's talk about the different types of contracts here. Let me scroll my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. So the big disclaimer I want to talk about with contracts is there's just so many variations that you can do, whether you're hopping on just to do a bug fix, or whether you're building the entire app from scratch, or whether you're just coming on to build a feature, or maybe do a conversion from Objective-C to Swift. I mean, the world of contracting, there's so much variety. And this is why I recommend like every developer at least do a chapter of their career in contracting. I'm not saying do it forever, but try it for a year. You're just going to get exposed to so many different things, good and bad. You know, you're going to get exposed to like some new ideas, some new code bases or architectures that you like, or you're going to get exposed to architectures that are terrible and code bases that are terrible. But that is also a learning experience to where you can be like, I've dealt with that before. Yeah, we're not doing that. So with the world of contracting, like I said, so much variety. You're going to see so many different code bases. I highly recommend anybody do a chapter in that in their career. So again, I'm going to talk about types of contracts that I've dealt with because that's what I know. There are many that I haven't dealt with. So I would love to hear it. If I've missed any, whether you're watching the replay or live, let me know what type of contract that if I didn't talk about that you've done, just to kind of let the community know that this is what's out there. Because that's the point of the stream. I want people that are curious about contracting just to know the type of work that they could potentially be getting into. So the first type of contract, which is one I just signed, and that's why I want to talk about this, is that is a contract to hire. So it's basically like it's almost like a trial period. Not almost, it is. It's basically a trial period before they hire you full time, right? Because when you're doing the job interviews, as I've seen lately and many people have seen, it's really hard to get like the full feel for a candidate in like a 30-minute interview, right? But if you work with them for a month to 6 weeks, you're going to get a much better feel for if you like that person, if you like working with that person, you're going to be able to judge their work. So that is where something like a contract to hire comes into play. And again, that's what I just signed here recently when these interviews didn't work out. So the cool thing about that is when you come on as a contract to hire, you're kind of thinking with the mindset of, this is going to be a long-term thing. So you're part of the team right away. Whereas sometimes when you're a contractor, you're kind of like a hired gun, like a mercenary. So you don't really feel quite part of the team because you're only going to be there for 2-3 months. But contract to hire, you get a more long-term feel for it. So for example, like in this new contract, we're still figuring out what exactly the app is. So, I'm in, and it's a small startup, like a 5-person startup. And again, if you don't know the story, I talked about it in the vlog. It's people I used to work with at a previous startup that I've known for years. And they brought me in to help them out, get started. So, but I'm in all the meetings, like from the beginning, like what is this app going to be? Or wireframing the app. What I'm trying to say is you're much more invested doing a contract to hire than if you were just a contractor coming in. So that's one aspect of it that I like. And then another type of contractor you can possibly see is just a full-time contract, whereas, there's no, and the benefit of being hired full-time is you'll get like the benefits, like the healthcare, you get a salary, you're not hourly. It's typically more secure than just like a contract. So again, the other type of contract could just be you're just a full-time contractor, like or just we'll call it long-term, not full-time. Maybe it's like a 1-year contract or a 6-month contract, like something pretty long-term. And then that you do feel as part of a team because, like I said, you are there longer term, but it's still like there's an expiration date, like there's an exit. So it's very similar to contract to hire, but just slight differences. And then another one I want to talk about is working at a development agency. So that's what I spent pretty much all of 2017 doing. And that is where I got exposed to so many different code bases, so many different coding styles and different types of apps. So if you're not familiar with what it's like to work at a development agency or work for one, yes, you are still a contractor, you are still hourly, and the work fluctuates. Like there was periods of 2017 where I was working 50 hours a week. There was also periods where I didn't have any work for 3 weeks. So you still get that fluctuation when you're working with the agency because, projects come in and you finish a project and maybe it's a couple weeks before a new project comes in. But anyway, the cool thing about working there is you pretty much have a team around you. So at this development agency specifically, I had a full-time backend web developer. I had a full-time designer. They went out and found the clients. They did all the negotiation. It was basically like they just feeded me work and I was on an hourly rate. I didn't have to deal with design. I didn't have to deal with backend. And the backend developer I was working with, you work with them over multiple projects. So you get to learn kind of their style and you build like a working relationship. So by the time you're on your third, fourth project with them, it's just like a well-oiled machine. You're working together. So that's what I like about that. You don't got to worry about finding clients. You don't got to worry about tracking down payment. You don't got to worry about design or backend. You just code the client. It's a pretty easy life as long as they can feed you enough projects. But sometimes, like I said, if the agency is struggling to get new clients, then you might not have work for a couple weeks and you got to find work elsewhere. Backing up big picture, that's another thing. If you do go the contracting route, you need to diversify your clients. And I didn't quite do that in 2017. I was only with this development agency. But what I should have done, and I did it later in the year where I was working with this development agency and just like an independent contract. But you never want to be beholden to just one client, right? Because at any time they could fall off the face of the earth or issues can happen with them. You always want like another client to at least, sustain some kind of income. So another good thing about working with the development agency, like I said, is different types of projects, but also different stages of the project. What I mean by that is, so I worked on probably about 6 or 7 apps with this development agency over 2017. 2 of them I built from start to launch from scratch, pretty much by myself. I would say 95% of the code. And when I say by myself, not that I didn't have like people reviewing the code, but it was my project. And then some of the other apps, like I said, I did an Objective-C to Swift conversion. Sometimes I would just come in and do a feature. Sometimes I would just fix a few bugs. But it's just, like I said, it's really cool to see and touch a bunch of different code bases and a bunch of different types of apps. And then the last project type of contract that I've worked on, and again, I'm only going over the ones that I have personal experience with, so I can actually speak to them. If you do know more, love to hear about it in the comments. But yeah, and this is just working with like an individual. We've all probably, once people find out you're an app developer, like, oh, I have an app idea, can you build it? These are the toughest ones. I typically like working with like funded startups or funded companies, just because a lot of times an individual doesn't fully understand like why development costs so much and why it takes so long. And, you know, they'll look at like a mature app, like take like an Instagram, for example, and like they don't realize, you know, that's, you know, I don't know how old it is, 6, 7 years old and has had hundreds of developers working on it over 5 years. That's how it got to that point. You know, when you're just one developer working on something for 4 months, like you have to like lower those expectations. But when you're dealing with just an individual, a lot of times they don't realize that and they don't like fully understand that. So you got to be real clear on the communication. But yeah, that, and then when you're working with that, you got to track down the payments, you got to find the clients. That's probably my least favorite type of contracting. My favorite type of contracting is, you know, for sure working with a development agency, just 'cause, as long as they're feeding you the work. So all right, that's kind of the rundown on the types of contracts. I'm hoping you guys have some good questions that I can go deeper and I can expand on some of those. That's kind of the high level overview. Let's go back up and catch up on the chat and go ahead, start firing away on the questions here. All right, we're talking about the Instagram thing, stories. Yeah, like I said, stories are easy for me to pump out. I'll just kind of like document my day, but actually finding what to post is kind of hard. Hey, Sean, I want to say that your videos helped me get an iOS internship at my #1 choice company. Keep doing what you do. That's awesome, Matt. I appreciate you saying that. That kind of makes it all worthwhile. You know, I put a lot of work into these videos. Like it's probably 5 to 7 hours per video that gets put out. And as you can probably imagine, I'm still a small YouTuber, so I don't make money off YouTube. So all the stuff I'm putting out, and I'm not like, don't feel bad for me, I do fine contracting. But it is nice to hear that, you know, all the work I'm putting into this is paying off. Because I've seen quite a few people email me or DM me about, you know, getting jobs or getting internships based on my channel. So that's awesome to hear. I love when you guys say that kind of stuff. Alistair Holmes says, hey Sean, glad I managed to catch a stream. Hope it's not about to end. Nope, we just got started. I typically go for about an hour, so I'm about 15 minutes in. So about 45 minutes. And it really all depends on the stream of questions, right? Like if the questions stop, then I'm done. So if you want this to keep going, you know, keep the questions coming. Like I said, I typically hit them all. I'm not big enough of a YouTuber yet to where the live chat is unbearable. We'll get there one day, but for now, if you ask a question, it's pretty much going to get answered. In the future, you might have to super chat to make sure I see it, but for now, you're probably good. If you even want to super chat for the hell of it, I appreciate that. So let me find my spot here. All right, Miraz says, who's winning the NBA championship? The Warriors. Yeah, I don't think Houston's going to get by him, and then I'm rooting for Philly, actually. Like, I would love to see Philly go all the way and win it, but because like I said, I'm an NBA fan. I don't really root for one team. And my favorite thing about the NBA is watching like the story of young teams, you know, come up and mature and become like awesome teams. So that's why I like the NBA. Derek says, hey Sean, any advice to get started iOS contracting? I've been developing apps for about 3 years on and off, looking to leave my web development job to be an iOS contractor. So I always say, so if you have a web development job and you've been building apps for a while, I always say this, it's all about your network. I have not found a contracting job that was just me randomly applying or me randomly going somewhere. Like literally my entire contracting career has been built through my network. Whether it's from people I met in my boot camp, people I met playing basketball years ago, like back home, people I've worked with at previous startups. I told you that's just how I got this job, but they also were reaching out to me about a different contract like 6 months ago. So that's why I say, and even if you get a small contract to start your career, blow it away, like kick ass at it, like do awesome at it, because everywhere you go, if you do awesome work and everybody like, loves working with you, that's going to come back around. It may take a year, it may take 2 years, but if you start building that up with enough people, that's going to come back around. So Derek, it's tough to get started, and I would start, really cheap rates if you can afford it. Start it on the side. Don't start full time. Like, keep your web development job, pick up a couple contracts on the side to get the feel for it and to start building that network. And then maybe after doing that for a little bit, then make the jump to go full time. But it's really hard to just say I'm a full-time contractor and start. Like, it's much easier to start the ball rolling as a side gig and then make the switch to full time. Sonka says, is you're currently hourly at 100 yet? Yes. Swifty Tilting Planet. I like that name. I know that's Caleb. I recognize it from Twitter, but that name threw me off. All right. Congratulations on the new contract to hire. P.S. I love the job hunting video playlist. Thanks. Yeah. Like I said, I got a lot of great feedback on that video series, so I'm glad I put it out because, like I said, I wasn't sure if I was going to. I love just coding the client. LOL. Yes, that's very stress-free. No backend, no design. Just I literally get designs perfectly done to spec, have a backend API well documented, and I just code. It's pretty convenient. So if you can find a gig like that, do what you can to hold on to it. Yeah, it's nice. Shivam says, are you going to update any video on the Swift interview tips after you've gone through the interview recently? I'm curious to know other questions they've asked and the level of questions. No, to be honest with you, my Swift interview tips video series, even though it's now a year old, still holds up. They ask the same stuff. Like I said, so the one thing I got asked that wasn't on there was about generics. And how generics interact with protocols and how generics have to like conform to protocols and stuff like that. So maybe I'll update it with a video on that, but for the most part, it still holds true. And like I said, I used it to study, and where I stumbled in the interviews wasn't on the Apple knowledge and the iOS knowledge. It was always on like the CS like coding question knowledge, and that's just a totally different thing. All right, sorry. I hate when this chat sometimes will scroll all the way to the bottom and I lose my spot. All right, Chris says, about the transition from the military, I've been learning iOS dev on and off for a couple years now. Are there small jobs in iOS dev that could be used as resume builders for finding a job on the outside? This is tough. Not that we'll be paying. Like, anytime somebody's trying to make the transition, I would always recommend like build small apps. They don't have to be huge production apps, just to start building your portfolio. Build a portfolio website that like shows it off, and then also have GitHub so people can like check out your code. And really, you just need to demonstrate that you can do all the main things that iOS developers typically do, and that's going to be network calls, collection views or table views. There's a whole, like I said, go on to my channel. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that. But build small apps, build 3 or 4 apps, and then go out and market yourself as a junior developer. Like, here, I can do all the basic stuff, and that will help. But to be honest with you, Chris, like, it's not easy landing your first iOS developer job. Like I always say, I applied to like 60 companies for my first developer job. I only got 3 callbacks, and one of them like worked out. And when they did hire me, and I've told this story before, so longtime viewers have heard this, but they didn't hire me because I was a good developer. They hired me because they liked me, they liked my work ethic, they liked my background, they liked my attitude. They were like, okay, we know you're a junior developer. We'll teach you, we'll mold you, but we like you, so we'll take a chance on you. So I would, and again, this is just my experience. I'm sure everybody has different experiences, but for me, it was the soft skills that got me the job, not the technical skills. So don't forget about those soft skills. They're very important. I'm not saying technical skills are nothing, but don't forget about the soft skills. Robert Ramirez says, how do you estimate contracts that include technologies that you've never used? Do you include research time in the estimate? Yes, and I charge for that, but I also tell them upfront. So, for example, one of the contracts I had to work on used voice recognition, and I had never done voice recognition before. So in the negotiations, when we were talking about features, you just got to be honest and upfront with that. Say, like, hey, I'm going to have to research and learn this. I haven't dealt with this before. So just so you know, that's part of the allotted time. And they know they're paying you hourly for your time. But as long as that's the whole key to contracting. Just upfront, honest, transparent communication. That will solve pretty much all your problems in contracting. Any horror stories you hear from contracting is when like communication breaks down, one side of the deal like stops, communicating, stops responding, or, is never around to ask clarifying questions. Communication is the key to contracting for sure. Norbert says, I've been coding for about 3 months now, and while I feel like I'm learning, it also feels like I'm learning really, really slow, even though I spend at least 10 hours a day on it. Norbert, it's a journey. I always say patience and perseverance, because It's yeah, 3 months to be honest with you is nothing. I learned for 7 months before I got my job, and I think that was fast. So it's not uncommon for somebody to be, learning for 6 months to a year before they get their first job. And a lot of people feel that way. I remember feeling even like 7 months into learning, I felt like I wasn't writing my own code. I felt like anytime I coded something, it was like, okay, I learned this in a tutorial, and I just kind of like regurgitated what I learned in that tutorial and put it there. I didn't feel like I was writing like my own code until like probably 8 months to a year into like learning how to code. So that's my biggest thing. Don't stress out if you don't pick it up right away. There's a reason why developers get paid so much, because it is hard. Not everybody can do it. Like it's not, if it was so easy that you could learn it in 3 months, there'd be developers everywhere and we'd be making like nothing. So just keep that in mind. It's a hard journey, but it is very, very worth it. Like once you get to the other side. So 3 months is nothing, just to be honest with you. If you were saying I've been learning for 10 hours a day for 9 months and you felt that way, then I would share your concern. But 3 months is nothing, to be honest with you. So keep at it for sure, and keep reaching out for help if you have it. We'll definitely help out. Alexander says, what do you think about Objective-C? If someone will ask you to create a project in Objective-C, do you accept it? So I'm actually going to do a video all about my Objective-C feelings here in a bit. And I do see some super chats rolling in. Appreciate that, guys. I'll get to that after this question. So I am going to do a video about my feelings on Objective-C. So I'll keep it really, really short right now because that video is going to come in a couple weeks. But to answer your question just succinctly, if someone asks you to create a project in Objective-C, do you accept it? I don't personally, because I'm not struggling for work, and I hate to sound like arrogant, but because I'm not struggling for work, I have more options to pick and choose what I work on. And if I have like Swift projects or Objective-C project, like I'm going to pick the Swift project 100% of the time. So now if I was in a different situation to where it's like, I just need work, like I'm struggling, I need to build my resume, my portfolio, like I'm just starting out, then yeah, I would take it. And actually, like I mentioned before, I did a Objective-C to Swift conversion at my previous development agency. That was actually the very first project with them to get started. And how I built that relationship with them was I started with that project, and that was like a 1 week project. It took nothing and didn't really pay anything. But because they loved what I did on that project and how quick of a turnaround it was, they're like, oh, let's put them on a new project. And I did the same thing. I blew it out of the water. I just over-delivered. They're like, oh, okay, let's put them on this bigger project. And then by the next project, I was taking on building the whole app by myself. They trusted me. So like I keep saying, it's a process. Don't expect to like your first project be an amazing thing. Like start small. Don't be afraid to work for cheap, just to build your resume and build relationships, and then kind of start ramping up your rate, and you'll take on bigger projects. At least that's what happened with me. Okay, let me get to the super chats here. So Chris, many thanks. Appreciate that, Chris. Thank you very much. The $1.99. Mujtaba Mahum. No comment, but thank you so much. Feel free to ask your questions in the super chats, or just to show appreciation. That works too. But yeah, anytime you super chat, I'll definitely dive to that right away. Well, I'll at least finish my sentence and then go back to that. All right, let's get back to where we were at. Patrick says, I like the idea of contracting. My problem is finding the contracts. Is there a way to pick up contracts? So I did a whole video on that, Patrick. And the cliff notes it's just all your network. And I've mentioned to you before, I think you're doing a great job on Twitter building that up. But yeah, start with small projects. I kind of just said all this, so I'll just repeat it quickly. But start with small projects, and don't worry about making money off them. The relationship you build is more important than the money, if it's the right kind of relationship, if you see it having a future. So yeah, start small. And I always say start on the side. Like I said, don't quit your job if you don't have 3 or 4 contracts lined up. Definitely start small. Norbert says, like that pick review thing, which I still don't get. I'm really worried that I might never truly get certain stuff. Norbert, I know the feeling. I think we've all been there. I think anybody here that's read that, and they might have already touched on it, but can probably relate to that comment. Yeah, it's repetition too. Like this pick review thing. Or even like table views are confusing at first, but once you've done your 30th picker view and your 50th table view, like it'll just be muscle memory, so it's repetition, perseverance, patience, like all that stuff. Like I said, it's not an easy journey. So don't get discouraged. You're still super early. Oscar says, how do you find contracts most of the time? Networking. Yep. Do you use Upwork? So I don't use Upwork just because it's kind of like a race to the bottom with Upwork. And what I mean by that is, you'll have people on there working for 10, 15 bucks an hour. And full disclaimer, I haven't messed with it in like 2 years. So maybe it's changed, but I know in the Patreon community, Avars, he's kind of like our resident Upwork expert. He's done a lot of contracts on Upwork. Yeah, so from what he says, it pretty much hasn't changed. So I can't compete with 15 bucks an hour rates. So that's kind of what you get there. Now, that being said, if you are in a location where 15 bucks an hour rates, are fine for you, then sure, try it. Just know it's probably not going to be the best work, but it's a good way to get started at least. If those rates are fine for you. Alistair Holmes says, I know you're not a big fan of cross-platform development, but what are your thoughts on Flutter, the new framework from Google? I don't really have any thoughts on it because I haven't looked into it. So with this full-time contract and this YouTube channel, I don't have much time for exploring like new technologies that aren't pertinent to a contract. Like anytime I explore new technology, it's going to be because of a contract, just because of my limited time. And so, for example, right now, you might see some Core ML tutorials because this new project I'm on utilizes Core ML. So now that I'm going to have to learn that, basically that's what happens. As I go through my career, as I have to learn stuff, that's kind of what I put out on YouTube. You notice a lot of my YouTube content is about contracting, hence this live stream. It's because that's what I've been doing. Yeah, but overall, I'm not a fan of, I shouldn't say I'm not a fan. It certainly has its place, but if you have the choice and money's not an issue, like native 100% of the time is going to be better. The main reasons to not do native are, because you can't afford an iOS developer and an Android developer, or you just want the ease of like one code base, but having that, there's trade-offs to it for sure. But I think if money's not an issue, like if you're a well-funded startup or something like that, then yeah, you go native. Norbert says, when did you feel like you can code freely without worry? I would say probably about a year into my career, to be honest with you. Even, like I said, even when I got hired 7, 8 months in after learning, even those first few months on the job was trial by fire, just like thrown in the deep end, learn. And it was a lot of imposter syndrome. So yeah, probably about the 1 year mark, I started to feel comfortable. Oscar says, how do you get in touch with startups that need you? Nowadays, it's this YouTube channel. I mean, I turned down a lot of work. That's why, like I said, I'm not struggling to find projects. So this YouTube channel has been like a great marketing thing for me, kind of inadvertently a little bit. But and then living in San Francisco obviously helps because you go to like local iOS dev meetups, you start meeting a bunch of people. That's how you grow your network. To answer your question, like if you're not in Silicon Valley, if you don't have a YouTube channel to bring in work, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. There's the one thing I would do. There's a site called angellist.co. And that's where a lot of the, I'll type it in the chat here. It's like angellist.co. Actually, I don't think links work in the chat. I've tried this before, but just Google AngelList, and it's like a list of startups. And you can like sort it by contracting, full time. You can sort it by your location, but definitely check out AngelList. Norbert, yep, I think I answered that question. The last one. Cameron says, have you ever entered into a contract and then realized how ugly the existing code base is? How do you propose major changes to the employer without being offensive? So ideally you would have done this kind of before you accepted the contract. So anytime I accept so I've never like come into a new contract on an existing code base. When I have dealt with existing code bases, it's been with this development agency. So they already found the client or they've already been working on it. It's one of their clients from 2 years ago, but I just came in and started working on it. So that I didn't really have a choice with the development agency, but if I was just working with, individually going to it, I would definitely make sure to check out the code base before, and you may have to sign an NDA because people don't want to do that, but entering a contract on an existing code base without being able to look at the code base first is a little risky. And if you get into an ugly situation, it's kind of your fault. And if the client pushes back, say, no, I don't want to show you the code without you actually committing to the contract, I don't know, that's a little shady. Like they have to understand that like you need to know what you're getting into, All right, Oscar, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for all these interesting videos, man. Really appreciated. Thank you, Oscar, for the support. Thanks. And yeah, okay, so Oscar, yeah, you're the one that asked about how to get in touch with startups. Yeah, definitely AngelList for sure. Simon says, what iOS junior must know? Well, that's pretty vague. But I'll answer it simply. like the core thing that you need, that pretty much every interview, take-home project, or mainly any interview is going to ask about, is this core knowledge, is be able to download information from the internet via like JSON and JSON parsing, parse the JSON, create objects from the JSON, show it in a table view, collection view, whatever, however it's displayed on the UI, and be able to do that smoothly. That's kind of a very, very core thing. That's obviously not all an iOS junior needs to know. I can't answer that, can't answer everything a junior iOS developer must know, but if you can download data, parse the JSON, show the JSON in a table view, and it's smooth scrolling, you know, you're actually doing it on the right thread. That's a very core fundamental skill that I think every developer will show, and you're probably going to be asked about in an interview. Matt says, at a restaurant with family, so can't watch. Just wanted to say, I really hope this will be a permanent video. Yes, it will. All my live streams, there's a replay afterwards. So Derek says, thanks, Sean. Amazing advice. Good luck on your next contract. Thank you. What's a good starting hourly rate in 2018? So Patrick, this varies obviously based on your location. You know, being in Silicon Valley, I can charge more because that's expected, or, you know, working here, like everybody, the San Francisco cost of living is ridiculous. So depending on your area, also depending on your demand, like if you're desperate for contracts. So here's how I got my start. And I do have a video all about my contracting rate. If you look on my channel, I don't know if you can search my channel, but it's just, I talk about like what my hourly rate is back then. And this was like a year ago, and it was $70 an hour. But I also talk about how I started at like $30 an hour or $45 an hour on my very first contracts, and then slowly worked my way up. And the reason I did that cheap, and when I say cheap, I'm saying it's cheap for San Francisco, Silicon Valley. Obviously $45 an hour may be like a lot for different, you know, areas. But in Silicon Valley, that is cheap just due to the cost of living. So, but the reason I was working for that cheap was because I knew I just needed the portfolio. I knew I needed the experience. I knew I needed to start, you know, making these contacts. So it's very, very hard to do a good starting hourly rate. But Patrick, what I would recommend is if you do find a full-time, I know you're interviewing, so if you do find a full-time job somewhere, maybe start trying to pick up a small contract on the side just to get a taste for it. And that's what I did anyway. Slowly picked up contracts on the side, and then, you know, it turned into something bigger. But yeah, like I said, I never recommend just jumping into contracting full-time right away. Oscar says, do you think we should have as much higher rate for contracts with ARKit as it's still very new? Yeah, that's another thing that plays into rates is what they're building. Like if you're super specialized right now, if you're the ARKit expert, there's not many of those around, like practically none when it comes to the entire pool of iOS developers. So yeah, if you are an ARKit expert and you can prove you've shown, you know, your portfolio has all these awesome ARKit apps, yeah, you can charge a much higher rate. And that's not just for ARKit. That's any like highly specialized skill that not a lot of people have, right? Like I said, if it's just a standard app that any iOS developer can build, yeah, you're probably not gonna be able to charge extra for that. But yeah, if it's a super niche thing, for sure. Afam says, how many languages do you know after the boot camp? Only knew Swift, right? Where'd you go to learn and stay sharp? So yeah, I mean, I've pretty much been focusing on Swift basically my whole career. I know basic HTML, CSS, but I don't really count that. And I've just started learning Solidity, which is like Ethereum blockchain development. So that's kind of what I'm learning now because I want to kind of like future-proof my career. There's going to be another vlog on future-proofing your career coming soon, just because that's where I think the world is going. So I want to kind of be prepared to potentially make a career change if necessary. But that's really all I know because I still consider myself relatively early in my career. I'm 3 years in. And I say that going from like 3 years ago, I didn't even know how to code at all. So, you know, had I gone to 4 years of a computer science degree or got my master's, you know, then I would consider myself more senior. But going from 3 years ago, I didn't even know how to write any code to now, I still consider myself, I wouldn't say a junior developer, but I'm not like super crazy senior. So for that reason, I've been focusing on Swift just to become as great at Swift as I possibly can. Because I feel like as you're still in that learning phase, if you try to spread your learning out among like 4 languages, like you're going to be like okay at all those languages, but you're probably not going to be great at any one of them. At least that's my opinion. So that's why I focused on Swift. Oscar says, I plan to start contracting July after graduating. Is it harder to find opportunities during the summer or doesn't it matter? I've found it doesn't matter, at least in my experience, but that is just a sample size of one. Yeah, I haven't seen seasonality matter at all in my work. Pranav says, hey Sean, I've been programming C++ for 2 years and have taken beginner iOS course. Are there any courses you recommend to help me advance from beginner in Swift? Courses like Udemy and Treehouse. Treehouse is good. I haven't done Treehouse since like Swift 1.0, so I'm sure they've improved because Swift was just a baby when they first came out. But again, I always recommend raywunderlich.com. Just Google Ray Wunderlich, RayWenderlich. It's like 15 or 20 bucks a month or something like that, but they just have a ridiculous amount of video series you can go through. That's what I did. That's how I got my start. I really got to get like an affiliate deal with them or something, because I recommend them at least twice a day, like on Twitter or a video or a stream. I got to work out something. Maybe they'll sponsor a video or something, but I probably send them so much business. It is important that an iOS developer should also have web development knowledge or should only focus on iOS development. It will absolutely help you. Like that's what I think. That's what I consider as the missing piece of my puzzle. I feel like I have good design. I could design an app. I can build a client. I just can't build the backend, like a custom backend. I'm not talking about using Firebase or anything like that. Like build a custom backend. And if I had that, like I'd be a one-stop shop. I could do everything, and that would absolutely help me. So what I'm going to recommend it is 100% helpful and important and great. But if you're trying to learn both at the same time, that may hurt you more than it helps you. So I would recommend learning one first and then branch off to the other. But for sure, it is awesome knowledge to have, for sure. Too many people downplay soft skills. Soft skills also got me my first full-time gig. 100%, Mark. I'm obviously with you on that. And that's what got me my first gig. And especially now you're seeing all this like ethics in programming with the Facebook stuff and like the Uber scandals and, you know, the Google memo issue. Like, I think soft skills were already important. I think with all this kind of stuff going on in the tech world, they're going to become even more important. So, and I see it all the time on Twitter. People are saying, you know, the technical interviews for software engineers should be less about algorithms and more about, you know, your emotional intelligence or your, you know, ethics and stuff like that. So I'm seeing a little bit of a push for that. So maybe things will change. Robert Ramirez says, what software do you use for creating graphics for your website and iOS apps? So I use Sketch. Just Google Sketch app. It's like a little orange diamond icon you'll see. But that's what I use there. Sorry. All right. What are the sites I can find freelance job to make extra money? I don't use them, so I'm going to name some sites, but I can't like vouch for them. But Upwork is one. Toptal, Toptal is another one. Crew.co, like crew.co is one. So check those out. Who do you bid on to be in the NBA Finals? I think it's going to be Warriors and Cavs again. Unfortunately, I think LeBron's going to get to the East. It doesn't matter who's on his team. Oscar says, how do you guess the number of hours it's going to take you to do the contract, as coding always takes more time than expected? So the last part of that question is the key there. Anytime you do an estimate, I always add a buffer to it. And that's kind of like the art of it. Like, so let's say I think something's going to take me 20 hours. I'll probably estimate 30 hours. Just because, like you said, someone once told me, says, go ahead and estimate it and then double your estimate, just because, you know, that's what's going to happen. I usually don't double it. I usually, you know, do like I said, if it's a 20-hour thing, I'll budget 30. Yeah, this is not the easiest thing to do. It's kind of like an art, but I think like I said, the last part of your sentence shows me that you understand that it always takes longer than expected. So just take that into account when, you know, estimating. Some in my eye. Do you do a coding interview for contracting jobs? Yes and no. Sorry, I got something high. So I had to do like for the development agency, I had to do like a very basic interview. But then once I interviewed once, and like I said, I worked on like 6 or 7 apps with them, like the interview was over, it was fine. Plus I had been working with them, so they know. And then this contract to hire thing, I didn't have to interview for, because like I said, it was people I worked with at my last startup. So they worked with me for a year and a half. So like they knew. So I would say it depends on how good of a in you have with the contract. Like I said, if it's through your personal and professional network, you probably won't have to interview, because hopefully you've built up that network you've proven yourself, if you will. But if you're going sight unseen to a contract, you're probably going to have to do some sort of an interview. Yeah. Quentin Sanderson, you were the man. I'd buy you a beer if I was in the Bay Area. Appreciate that, Quentin. Appreciate the support on Twitter too. I notice you're always like retweeting and commenting and stuff, so appreciate that. Yeah, don't, as long as you guys have the same avatars, like I mentioned that before, like I'm probably gonna recognize you. I might not remember everybody's names, but the avatars for sure I'll recognize. Mujtaba says, what are the libraries that you recommend for streaming audio, Spotify-like app? Mujtaba, I've never actually built an app like that. So I wouldn't know. I would have to research that, and I don't want to give you bad information. But yeah, and that's the tricky thing with development is it's impossible to work on, you know, streaming music, streaming video, camera, video, you know, location. Like there's so much in development, like you're not going to be able to work with it all. So there's plenty that I haven't been able to touch yet. But going back to what I said before about contracting, that's why contracting is good, is because, you know, you may spend 3 or 4 months on a project and then you're on to the next one. So you get exposed to many different types. Whereas if you just go work for one company for 2-3 years, like you're pretty much stuck on that one type of app for 2 to 3 years. And unless you do a lot of side projects, you know, you haven't really expanded your horizon. So again, this is why I recommend contracting for at least a chapter of your career, just to get all that experience. Mark says, Patrick is doing an amazing job on Twitter and LinkedIn. Go Patrick. Yep. Give Patrick a follow and just watch what he does on Twitter. If you guys are new to the channel, you know I always preach how powerful Twitter is and how important it is to building your network. And if you don't have a Twitter account, you should definitely get one and start utilizing it. Join the conversation. It's going to help you out in the long run. I'm actually going to do a video on this. Somebody recommended it to me, one of my viewers, to do a video about how to utilize Twitter as a developer. And I'm going to put that video out, but I'm going to put it out closer towards WWDC, because WWDC is a huge part in how I got my start on using Twitter. Basically, I just followed the hashtag WWDC 2017 and got involved in like every conversation, started following a ton of people. But there's going to be a whole like Twitter dedicated video coming out soon, before WWDC, so within the next month or so. Norbert says, what I do is I make an app for like a nightclub or bar and then try to sell it. It's a win-win because I either sell it, learn, or I just learn. Yeah, you can't lose there. Anytime you're building an app, you can't really lose. Yeah, because you're going to learn, like you said. Not says, Sean, as you said, you applied for 70 companies before. So during that times, would you keep updating, changing your resume in terms of format and details? Thanks. Yeah, so as I learned stuff, you know, for example, during that time, I remember I went through like a Sprite Kit course, or I did Ray Wenderlich's Sprite Kit 2D book. It's like a huge book. So after I did that, sure, I added Sprite Kit to my resume. But be careful. Don't put like, I'm a Sprite Kit expert. Like I have a section of like, I call it like worked on inside projects in that Sprite Kit. So they know that like, yeah, I've played with it, but I'm not like a Sprite Kit expert. So if you are updating your resume with stuff like that, just make sure you're honest about it. Like don't claim to be an expert on something because you did one tutorial on it, you know? Saga says, hey Sean, I'm stuck at pagination for a horizontal collection view. Know any tips or frameworks? I mean, that's hard to answer without looking at the code. I know, so IG list kit might be too much just for a horizontal collection view if you're just trying to scroll through. Yeah, post that in the Slack community. I or somebody will help out with that. So answering specific coding questions are pretty hard to do on a live stream, just for future reference. Deepak says, hi Sean, what path should I follow to learn iOS development? I am a beginner and I follow documentation, blogs, watch YouTube, but unable to figure out what I should do next. So there's a lot of phases, and I've been there, and it sounds like a lot of people here in the stream have been there. When you first start learning, you're in like the tutorial phase is what I call it. It's like you can only build something that you've done a tutorial on, or by following a tutorial, or basically like copying other person's code. And then you get to the phase where you start writing your own code, where you don't have to follow a tutorial to implement something. And it sounds like you're in between those phases. Now, how you go from tutorial phase to writing your own code phase, at least what worked for me, is start building your own apps. So for me, it was an app I put on the App Store called UReact. It was just a sticker app when iOS messages first came out that allowed you to do stickers, whatever. But writing my own app, not following a tutorial, writing my own app, and it can be something small, big, whatever, but that's when you're going to take that next step. Because again, you're implementing your own idea. You're not just following a tutorial. So that's my answer to you, Deepak, is just start building your own projects. Like come up with your own idea. And again, don't think that this has to be a production on the App Store. It doesn't have to be. Just, you know, say, hey, I want to build a video streaming app that I can stream video from, and try to build that and just build that feature. Ben Sullivan says, how many of your contracts do you include tests? I'm currently contracting for Domino's, which requires Java tests, yet to write my first one. So actually, and this is going to be very contract dependent, but the contracts that I've been on, Testing's not a thing. As bad as that sounds, just the honest truth. And that is, so as much as like touching all these the projects has, accelerated my career, the lack of testing is a little knock on my career too. But again, how the contracts that I've been working on typically work is it's always on a tight timeline. You're building it from scratch to launch, so you're worried about getting all the features in, and then just testing just kind of falls by the wayside. It's a sad truth, at least in the contracts I've been in. So sorry, Ben, can't help you out with the testing thing, as usually just doesn't get done. And again, but don't get me wrong, there are certain contracts that testing will be at the forefront of it. They'll be like, no, we want tests. So you just got to know that and budget that into your time estimate and your cost estimate as well. I just haven't done one of those contracts. Robert says, what are some red flags that tell you a job or a contract is bad? So if I'm interviewing for one, like I'm interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing me. Again, I want to make sure they can communicate well. I want to make sure they understand that software is long, takes a while. There will be bugs in the first run, like, because some people just expect like the first time they get a build, like it's going to be perfect, So it's hard to say specific red flags, but I just kind of make sure the person I'm dealing with like knows or understands how this all works. And if they don't understand, I do my best to explain it to them so they know. Wesley, good to see you again. Says, hi Sean, doesn't happen often, but I'm finally able to watch you live. Got a question for you as well. Do you think it's nice for a starting developer as myself to do a 1-year internship? It depends. I mean, 1 year's a long time, but I'm not saying it's bad. It depends on the company. Like, again, this is a crazy example, but like if it was like, yeah, you do a 1-year internship at Apple, then yeah, work for free for 1 year at Apple. That's so worth it. So you got to play into, is the company going to benefit you in the long run? Or maybe there's like a senior developer there that's going to take you under his wing and totally accelerate your career, then that's worth it. It's very hard to answer without knowing a ton of information about the situation. But if it's just, if you're like the only developer and it's a small startup that, may or may not go anywhere, then I would say probably not. But again, if you can get great knowledge from a more senior developer or the company is prestigious, that you can have that on your resume to help you on your next chapter of the career, that might be worth it. Yeah, sorry, Wesley, there's just too many variables to really answer that question, but hopefully I gave you some stuff to think about. Again, I lost my place in the chat. All right. Victor says, any online business ideas for programmers except being a freelancer? Start a YouTube channel. That's what I'm doing. This is going to turn into my side business. Not really making that much money off of it yet, but I have some ideas for the future: podcasts, ebooks, maybe some courses down the road, maybe some sponsorships down the road. So that's one thing you can do: educate people, whether it's this or you start making courses on like Udemy or something like that. If you don't want to be a freelancer, yeah, there's some ideas off the top of my head. Dia says, why some companies avoid working with a person who have video tutorials on the internet? Some companies get afraid of a developer who have personal work. Did you see that before? I haven't seen that. Like I said, I get a lot of incoming requests from my YouTube channel. People like, hey, I've seen your videos. I like you. I like what you're teaching. You can articulate your thoughts well. Yeah, we want to work with you. So I see the exact opposite, actually. Alexander says, how many dependencies do you include in your project approximately? Will you add new library to display from form, for example, or will you write your own custom form? So I'll just kind of answer this generally with my thoughts on third-party libraries. I typically, and this varies project to project, but I would say 4 to 5. Like Alamo Fire is always in there. Depending on the design, SV Progress HUD is pretty much always in there. So those two are a lock. And then from there, it's pretty much project dependent on what I need. And then sometimes you need libraries for like Crashlytics or something like that, or your whatever analytics piece you use. So basically my general thought is not a lot. If it's just a form, depends on how complicated the form is. But I guess the general theory is if it's not going to take me that long to write it myself, I would much rather do that. However, something like using iOS charts, which is like an entire charting package, like that would take me forever to write on my own. So yeah, I'm using the library. So it really all depends on how long it would take you to write your own. Machine says, hi, what's going on? Robert Ramirez, what tips do you have for crafting your Twitter, LinkedIn profiles? So as far as LinkedIn goes, my LinkedIn profile sucks. So I wouldn't take tips from me there. Your Twitter profile is pretty limited, right? You can only have like a little blurb. But definitely link to, if you have your own personal website, like link to that for sure. Let people know you're an iOS developer in your bio, for sure. And then, yeah, I guess really what boosts your Twitter profile is the quality of stuff you tweet and then how much you interact with people. Oscar says, do you sometimes do multiple contracts at the same time or only one at a time? Typically multiple. Right now it's only one because it's, like I said, it's a contract to hire full time. But yeah, there was a time when I was on like 4 or 5 different projects at a time for like a month. I wouldn't recommend that either. Like that was brutal. Just trying to like mentally juggle like what's going on with each project is pretty rough. So I think 2 to 3 is probably the sweet spot for me anyway. And I'm sure that sweet spot's going to be different for everybody. But for me, 2 to 3 is probably the sweet spot. Yeah, multiple is it's actually uncommon for me to be only on one. And then kind of, I'm just going to contradict what I just said. It is, anytime I'm only on just one, it is like a relief. Like it is a nice feeling. It's like, okay, cool. All I have to worry about is this one code base, this one project. So it is much easier to only worry about one, but yeah, 2 to 3 is typical. All right, catching up here on the chat. Sorry for the little pauses. Like I said, the chat will scroll to the bottom sometimes and I go back up and find my spot. Michael says, yeah, I find Twitter just a bunch of noise. Well, that's the beauty about Twitter is like you choose who you follow, right? So like if you follow nothing but iOS developers, and I've even unfollowed, so I followed a whole bunch of iOS developers and I've actually even like unfollowed some, not because I don't like them, but just because they tweet about like their personal life or what they're doing. And it's like, well, you know, I want iOS stuff. So you can prune and trim who you follow down to kind of, and this is good and bad, right? Because you're just like in an echo chamber, but you know, you can, if Twitter's a bunch of noise to you, that's, you know, you can control that. Carl says, when you go full stack, what backend will you use? I don't know. I've messed around with the mean stack, which is Mongo. I'm going to Express, Angular, and Node. Very, very minimal though. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to your question. Sorry, I'm going to mispronounce this name. Giermund. 20 years in counting as an independent developer. Yeah, that's awesome. It's not about the money. It's about stimulating your curiosity, for sure. Like I said, that's my favorite part about contracting versus full time is being able to work on many, many different types of apps. You know, like I said, if you worked at one company for 3 years, you're just working on that same app for 3 years. So this gives you some variety. All right, looks like we're coming to the end of the questions here. Got about 7 or 8 left. I'm going to we're hitting the hour mark too, so I'm going to try to fly through these real quick. But if you do have any questions, go ahead and get them in, or we're going to do like a lightning round real quick. So Guillermo says, I recommend to participate in meetups and building community. What Sean does is a really good way to build community. For sure, meetups, local meetups. If there aren't any meetups in your area, so you live in a remote town, definitely Twitter is a great way. And again, my Patreon community, hate to keep plugging that, but check out patreon.com/Sean Allen. And yeah, we talk about all kinds of iOS stuff in there. So again, your network is so important. It's the only thing in contracting. Tamam says, hello, Sean, I'm learning iOS development. Can this help me applying for good universities and increase acceptance opportunities? I don't know. I mean, I assume, you know, if you already know a certain development, that will help. But I picked up software development later in life. I was, like I said, 32 or 33 when I wrote my first line of code. So I'm not sure what it's like to, you know, apply to college. I didn't even go, well, I went to college later in life. But yeah, can't help you there. Sorry. Oscar says, how do you handle bugs that you did? Do you charge more or for free? Thanks, Sean. So bugs are part of the development process. I have been in certain situations where I messed up and like say I was trying to fix a bug and I was stuck on it for like 4 hours or whatever, and like it was a stupid typo somewhere. Like it should have never taken me that long to like find the bug. Certain times like that, I'll be like, all right, I'm not charging you 4 hours. Like that was me just being an idiot. However, like typical bugs that only take like an hour to find, like that's part of the process. It's only the extreme ones where like I waste a ton of time only to like something stupid I messed up. That's when I kind of like, all right, I'm not charging you. So it's kind of a feel thing. There's no like hard set, you know, rules. And some people are against that. They say, no, you were working, you charge for everything. Again, I'm more about building long-term relationships in this contract rather than milking out every dollar that I possibly can. I want to do an awesome job. I want to over-deliver so that the next time they need an iOS developer, I'm the first person they call. So that's kind of the way I look at it. Like, I'll sacrifice some money. I don't really care about that to build a long-term relationship. Sally says, who's winning the ship this year? It's going to be the Warriors again. Okay. Do we need to join Apple Developer Program to make VoIP calls using CallKit? I've never used CallKit, so I'm not sure about that one. Sorry. I'm sure the quick Google search will answer that one though. I'm sure many people have used CallKit. Mayor says, hey Sean, thanks. I've been working as an intern for MTV, VH1, Comedy Central. I took your advice and checked out Ray Wunderlich for tutorials. Turns out my manager is also a writer for them. Cool. Yeah, that's like I said, I preach this site all the time. It's how I got my start. There's just great stuff on there, and I think it's only like $15 a month now. I think when I did it, it was $20 a month. But you just can't go wrong with only spending that much money for all the content they have on there. Victor says, I am 18 in Macedonia, have made 2 very simple iOS apps on the App Store. I know Swift, core data. Am I prepared for freelancing? No. I mean, you could probably do it, but I always don't recommend freelancing as someone's very first job. I think you need to get some like real job experience first and then go freelancing. That's always the way I recommend it. Now, I'm not saying you can't be successful. I'm not saying you're going to fail. I'm just saying you're starting out freelancing as your very first job is the much harder path than getting a full-time job and then shifting to freelancing. But it's certainly possible. And again, just my opinion. But core data, everybody always asks about core data. I've used core data because I had to like learn it in my boot camp, but in my actual real life apps, I've worked on probably 9 or 10 apps now, never used core data. So it's not as prevalent as a lot of people seem to think. So I would say knowing core data, don't get me wrong, the basic principles of working with like a database and all that stuff, that's great. But core data itself, I've never touched it really. Hi Sean, greetings from Germany. What's going on, Khalid? Alistair says, how does one make a custom backend API for their app? Get a web developer to do it or learn backend web development. Ben says, a useful tip for new developers unsure what to learn next is to browse job boards for positions you eventually want. Then you can learn the technologies they require and create profile apps with them. Very good point, Ben. The only thing I will say about that is sometimes companies list like their requirements are a little bit ridiculous. But that's mostly in the like how many years of experience and education level they want. But yeah, that's a very good point. For everybody wondering, what do I learn? What do I learn? Start looking at some job descriptions, and that'll definitely point you in the right direction. Guillermo says, going to meetups, if your local one is not right for you, make sure you get a good train ticket and spend time on the train to prepare for the meetup. I've gone 6 hours on a train just to visit, or a 9-hour plane ride. That's some dedication. I'll give you that. Hey, Vars, what's going on? It looks like I'm a bit late. We'll watch the record. Big +1 for over-deliver. My current customer is already booking me for next projects. Yeah, so I don't know if Avars is still here, but Avars I did some coaching with me way back in the day. We're probably talking 7-8 months ago now, because he wanted to switch careers from, I think he was a product manager, into contracting, and he's successfully done that over the course of the 8 months. He's part of the Patreon community as well. So it's been fun to like watch his journey do that. And like I said, he's the local Upwork expert. So he started on Upwork, and I think he's kind of branched off away from Upwork now, but you know, he's successfully made the transition from product manager, I believe it's product manager, could be wrong on that, but to, you know, full-time iOS contractor. So congrats on that, Avars. You're kind of a good success story. Pablo says, if I remember correctly, you have a business finance background. Have you ever thought of combining the two and working as a dev for an accounting financial firm? Yeah, so I have a finance and economics background. Actually, where this is going to come into play is the potential future of my career, which is, like I said, like blockchain and smart contract development. So combining like cryptocurrencies and development, because crypto has a lot to do with like finance and economics. And then you combine the development side, seems like a pretty good match. So again, that's just something I'm starting to learn, starting to mess with, and you know, who knows what's going to happen down the line. Guillermo says, use core data if you need a relational database. Relational database. I usually cache core data locally for logistics stuff. However, my main database is Postgres. Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to say you're never going to use core data. I'm just saying I think a lot of people think that everybody uses it, and I think it's pretty rare actually to be used. Hey, what's going on, Liam? I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you back in the chat. Soheb says, can you make a video about a list of the most used stuff in iOS? Table views, collection views, networking, animations. Yeah, I could do like an overview video probably, but I think I have like a lot of individual videos on all that stuff. So maybe I could do like a, here's what you need to know to get started kind of thing, probably. All right, looks like there's only a couple questions left. Probably going to wrap up here in a couple minutes, just as a heads up. Avar's, yep, all those are correct. Big thanks for the support on the iOS dev career starting. Yeah, I hope you're loving it. I know that's the switch you wanted to make. Hopefully you're still loving it and you're not like, oh, why did I switch? Which is better, storyboards or Zib? Again, we almost made it. We almost made it. Thanks for keeping the content coming. Thanks, Victor. How to get a job at Facebook as an iOS developer? Well, if you've seen the Job Hunt Mega Vlog, you know I don't know that. All right, guys, we're taking off. I'm probably going to do these every 2 weeks now. I know last time I said I'm going to do them monthly, but probably going to do it bi-weekly now. But follow me on Twitter because that's where I'm going to post out when I'm going to do this. Like I'll post out a couple days in advance, like, hey, this Sunday, and then I'll post out like right before. So, all right, thanks for coming, guys. See you guys next time.